Hello, welcome back to this Uncanny Earth. And today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I wanted to get some videos uploaded. We wanted to get some videos uploaded under our videos tab. So we're going to start doing some more content outside of the live streams. And I decided to kick things off going back to the classics from when I first joined the channel, talking about Antarctica. And tonight we're going to talk about the Antarctic anomaly and the theory of mu. So, as you may remember from the Antarctica episode, there's a lot of stuff going on in Antarctica. So, let's go ahead and get started. Beneath the miles of ice, beneath the satellite blind spots and geopolitically frozen silence, lies a theory so audacious, so buried, it may predate all human memory. That Antarctica is not just a continent, it is a forgotten archive. That it is, or was, Mu, the ancient continent of Lemuria. Let's begin. So, we're going to start off talking about the ice wall. Antarctica. It is a land of endless white, untouched, unowned, and in many ways, unknown. From the research bases all the way where they have Ivan the Terrabus. Yes, that's a real thing. You can go on Google Earth and check it out. It's actually really cool. I really enjoyed it. I have actually done a lot. I have spent countless hours just wandering around Antarctica through Google Earth. And there's actually a lot more places in Antarctica not covered in snow than you might think. But anyways, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked. It is the only continent where no one is allowed to permanently live. The only people allowed there are researchers. The only landmass on Earth where all military activity is banned by treaty. Now, why is that? Out of all the whole planet, we're always fighting with each other. Why is this one single place? Why can they agree to be peaceful here? What is there that they're trying to protect? What is there that they're trying to research? That's what I ask, and that's what I intend to find out. So, beneath, where was I? Beneath all this ice, they found radiation. They were looking for radiation from a satellite in the sky, and instead they found it 6 miles beneath the ice. This is the only place where satellite data is strangely limited in certain regions. Hold on one second. Sorry, had to clear my throat. So, going back to the treaty we were discussing a moment ago, it was signed in 1959 by over 50 countries. It prohibits military operations, mining, and claim of ownership. Why? For the sake of peace? Or perhaps there's something there they don't want us to find. As the ice melts, and it is melting rapidly, new landscapes are emerging. I don't know if I should mention the GW word. I don't know how strict YouTube is on that, so I'll, kind of tiptoe around that. But, the Earth is kind of heating up. Let's just, word it like that. So, with all that going on, there is potential that it could melt the ice in Antarctica. And that could reveal some interesting things. Entire mountain ranges, warm lakes sealed beneath miles of frozen crust, and strange heat anomalies around a subglacial lake called Lake Vostok. And yes, they do have a research facility very close to Lake Vostok. 2023 saw new seismic activity beneath the surface. Some researchers believe a buried volcano is awakening, but others ask, what if it's not volcanic? What if it's architectural? Some sort of architecture, a building, or some sort of ancient ruins, perhaps, beginning to awaken. Now, in the early 1900s, a researcher named James Churchward, Churchward, sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. I apologize. But James Churchward claimed he had discovered references to a lost supercontinent, one that predates Atlantis, even older than Atlantis. He called it Mu. And according to his findings, Mu was a technologically advanced civilization that existed tens of thousands of years ago, possibly more than 50,000 years ago, and spanned the Pacific Ocean before being swallowed by a global catastrophe. Now, there are different opinions about this global catastrophe. Some theorize this global catastrophe was during the Great Flood, which is mentioned in the Bible as Noah's Ark or the Epic of Gilgamesh. And some people believe this was the same time the dinosaurs got hit by their meteor and it wiped out these civilizations. And some people believe that these civilizations were at war with each other, and Lemuria, was a much more aggressive and militant civilization, very militaristic, you know. And some theorize that they were able to harness the powers of frequencies and harmonics, and they were able to use that as weapons. Same thing as Atlanteans. Atlanteans were also able to, you know, use very strange powers of frequencies and harmonics that we no longer understand in our modern day times. And some people suggest that Atlantis was being pressured into joining Lemuria because they wanted absolute control over the entire planet. And Atlantis didn't want to submit their freedom or their control, and they wanted to live peacefully. They wanted to coexist. But Lemuria was like, we ain't having that. So they started a big giant war, and the big giant bombs blew up the big giant planet. And then we had to start over from scratch. And not to get political, but I've just I've got a bad feeling about the future and some of these devices and some of the stuff that's going on, and I'm just going to leave it at that and glaze right past that. Now, most modern scholars dismiss this as pseudoscience. All right, but Churchward was not alone. Similar stories appear in Mayan codices, Hindu texts, and Polynesian oral histories. Many claimed that Mu was the birthplace of the first humans, and that its survivors seeded Egypt, India, and Mesoamerica. And here's the thing, most people picture Mu as tropical, but that's only if you assume the poles have always been where they are now. Now, before we continue, I don't know how many of you have heard of the theory of the Anunnaki. So this isn't about the Anunnaki, but because of the people that suggest that Mu was the birthplace of the first humans, I feel that it's important that I mention the theory of the Anunnaki and the ancient astronauts at this current point in time. So some people have suggested that there was an ancient race of aliens known as the Anunnaki, and they lived on a planet Nibiru, and They had they had some, let's say they had environmental issues. You know, they had some problems with their atmosphere and they didn't have enough gold on their planet. So they needed to find another planet that had gold and they were capable of interstellar travel. So some people suggest that these Anunnaki, as they call them, were able to travel across the solar system, and over time, they eventually found Earth, where we are now. And they landed, and they found what was it, Homo erectus? You know, or was it Homo sapiens? I honestly don't remember. It was basically cavemen is what I'm trying to get at, you know, the old people before what we are now. I I honestly can't remember which is which. I'm having a bit of a brain fart here, so I apologize for that. But the cavemen, you know, the old man, man like humans. So they came here when we were still cavemen. And you may have noticed that after cavemen, humans started to advance shockingly quickly. Like we were walking, and then all of a sudden we were like teleporting, like that kind of level of difference in our technology at one point in time. And some people suggest that the Anunnaki came here looking for gold, and they found an abundance of gold on this planet, but they needed more workers to help them out. So they decided to create a race of workers by splicing some intelligence into the DNA of these early humans. Okay? And they say that they were able to modify their genes and the DNA of these early humans in order to make them much more intelligent and able to help them as their workforce. I don't want to use the wrong word and get us in trouble, but their workforce. And well, interesting thing is, if you think about it, I don't know how many of you have heard of CRISPR technology, but long story short, it is a newer technology that I am actually personally highly, highly interested in. And essentially, what it does is this CRISPR technology, as they call it, will allow you to essentially edit your very genes. And I'm not talking about your blue jeans or your shorts or your pants. I mean, like your DNA. This CRISPR technology will let you modify your genes and DNA on a root access level, almost like modifying files on a computer system, changing a 0 to a 1 or a 1 to a 0, turning different genes on and off. And I don't want to say too much, but it's just, I don't want to rant about this too much, but it's very interesting the things that they can do. And I was thinking about it earlier today, and the Anunnaki, they say that they were able to modify the genes and the DNA of humans, or like early humans, in order to make them more intelligent and increase their neural plasticity to help them learn better by modifying particular genes within their cell structure. And that is where we, modern day humans, originated. And what's interesting about that is it sounds very similar to CRISPR technology in the idea that they were able to modify the human genome structure. And I'm very interested in a lot of this newer technology that we're developing right now, such as CRISPR, because a lot of it just blows your mind if you really think about the implications of what it could possibly mean. But that's enough of a distraction. I'm going to get back to our main story now. So, as we were talking about this, pole shift, for mu that would have shifted it from a, warm tropical climate. Well, I'm sure you all remember us talking about the Perry-Reese map and how Antarctica was, I believe, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, it was about 1,500 miles difference or shifted from where it was previously. And they have core samples of the Earth of Antarctica to prove scientifically that it did used to be a warm tropical climate. And a pole shift would explain why it went from a warm tropical climate into this, icy tundra that it is now. And my personal favorite theory about how Antarctica, became so cold and flash froze like that is some people suggest that the Chicxulub, the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, there is actually a theory out there that when that asteroid broke through the atmosphere, that was part of what caused the second ice age, as well as the destruction of the dinosaurs. And it also caused Antarctica to freeze because the asteroid broke through the atmosphere, some people theorized that it could have allowed the space air. I'm not sure exactly what the right word to use is because I don't think air is the proper word, but it allowed the environment of outer space to enter the Earth temporarily. And it was so cold in the vacuum of space that only an extremophile would be able to survive that, such as a tardigrade, which we could talk about those in a different episode at some point if you like. But tardigrades are super interesting. They're essentially immortal within the animal kingdom. They're like basically invincible. They sent these guys into outer space for 10 days and brought them back down, and they were perfectly fine, and they can survive 1,000 times more radiation than humans. But I'm getting sidetracked again. But, anyways, what if Earth's axis had shifted? What if Antarctica used to be warm? Well, satellite radar has revealed ancient riverbeds under the ice. Some speculate that these are not natural. Could the cradle of civilization be buried under a mile of ice? Now, I used to think that Antarctica was Atlantis because all the ice had to come from somewhere and the water had to come from somewhere, right? Well, apparently the snow builds up over time and it is so slow to melt that it's actually able to accumulate over time, even though it only has as much rainfall as the Sahara Desert in a single year. I actually did a little bit deeper research into the weather of Antarctica recently, and I found out that, well, I don't really understand how weather works, so I'm just going based off of what I was reading based on what scientists have told us. But scientists have claimed that the explanation for why there's so much snow on Antarctica, despite their, snow and ice, 6 miles, over 6 miles of ice. And they're trying to tell us that that's because even though it only gets as much rainfall as the Sahara Desert in a single year, it's so cold that it takes so long for the snow to melt and, turn into water that it's able to build up all that ice over time. But I don't know. That just seems a little convenient to me. But anyways, now we're going to talk about the 1940s expedition and whispered bases. And yes, I'm being very, very careful with how I word this because we have gotten in trouble for using certain words in the past. So I made sure to go out of my way to encode this language symbolically so that we don't get in trouble. So let's go ahead and rewind to the 1940s, a time of war, secrets, and rapid technological advancement. In 1946, the U.S. Navy launched Operation Highjump, which we've discussed, before. We've gone into more detail before. But today we're just going to say it was a massive expedition to Antarctica led by Admiral Richard Byrd. Okay? It included 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and over 4,700 personnel. Officially, it was for training and scientific research. Unofficially, well, some say they were looking for something or someone, if you know who I mean. There are rumors, persistent and chilling, that certain factions of mid-century Europe made it to Antarctica before the war ended. They fled there. They built something, a hidden outpost, an underground base. The alleged site is known in legend as Base 211 or New Swabia. New Swabenland? Not sure if I can say that. I'm going to try it. A name tied to a German expedition to the continent in 1938. And you know exactly which German expedition I'm talking about. Admiral Byrd himself later gave interviews claiming the U.S. had encountered a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Was this information sorry. Was this disinformation? Or did he see something he wasn't supposed to see? But here's the thing. It did come out later on that his story was exaggerated. He did say that they had ships that could fly, but he didn't say they could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. He said they should expect attacks from the poles. And then they fluffed it up and made it sound extra nice because, the journalists, they got to sell the papers, right? Whatever. So, as we always say here, do your due diligence and do your own research as well. Don't just take our word for it. Do your own research. Look into this on a deeper level, and especially do some research on Admiral Byrd's journal, because a lot of these claims that are made, unfortunately, have been debunked as exaggerations by journalists. Now, we're moving on to discuss the Black Pyramid and forbidden geometry. High-resolution satellite scans have shown something uncanny on this Earth. See what I did there? 3 pyramid-shaped peaks rising from the ice. One of them, near the Ellsworth Mountains, appears to have perfect 60-degree angles, nearly identical to the Great Pyramid of Giza. And yet, no major scientific body will investigate it further. Is this coincidence? Natural formation? Or is this one of the last surviving structures of Mu? Like, what is a pyramid doing in Antarctica? There is so much mystery in Antarctica that is just mind-blowing. Like, no matter how much time you spend studying Antarctica, it doesn't matter because they won't let you go there, so you'll never understand. You'll never be able to figure out what's going on there. Unless the ice melts and something gets revealed. But now we're going to talk about Lake Vostok. Sealed beneath 2.5 miles of ice, it has magnetic anomalies and heat signatures suggesting geothermal energy or something synthetic. Some whistleblowers claim the ice is covering more than water. That beneath the crust, there's an entire system of chambers, vaults, and possibly a reactivation mechanism. Could this hall be the Hall of Records Edgar Casey spoke of? Not in Egypt, but beneath the ice? The Hall of Amynthus in Egypt, the Akashic Records in spiritualism and esotericism, and many different names, many different locations, but they all grant you access to the same information. What if the Hall of Amynthus in Egypt, the Akashic Records in spiritualism, what if they're the same thing but different access points? Just something to think about. So let's go ahead and go into what I like to think of as simulation layers and memory lockdown. Let's think beyond Earth and beyond history for a minute. Okay? What if Antarctica is not just a physical anomaly, but a simulation artifact? Think of the simulation as a memory grid. To control the simulation, you must lock certain data, places, times, or civilizations, such as Lemuria or Atlantis. Okay? What if Antarctica was the site of the original override command, the first version of the world, the original Earth? And what if it's been suppressed ever since, hidden beneath extreme cold and limited access to prevent the code from leaking? And maybe, just maybe, that's why they're able to maintain a peace treaty there, despite fighting everywhere else. And some dreamers say they've seen ancient cities beneath ice. Others have described symbols that change form or feelings of deja vu when looking at polar maps. And I personally, I'm not going to reveal their identity, but I personally have a friend who I showed an image of Antarctica once, and they had a physical response to the image and got a headache, and their head started to feel fuzzy, and they literally had to sit down. So it's just interesting what a simple image can do to the right person looking at it. Could it be that when the ice melts, the simulation loses containment? As the planet warms and the poles shift, one thing becomes clear. The ice is not just melting, it's releasing something. Whether that's water, memory, or ancient code, we may be witnessing the slow unraveling of Earth's most tightly held secret. So I'll leave you with a question. Have you ever dreamed of Antarctica? Not just the snow, but something hidden beneath it? If so, I want to hear your story. Until next time, stay curious, and as always, stay uncanny. Thank you, and we will see you next time.